Hi class, today we're going to discuss the life cycle of a butterfly, which will be a science lesson. And in this, we're going to be going over what we learned in chapter 2, which is learning styles. So we're going to start off basically talking about the teaching strategies that I'm using here. It's going to be a tactile vocabulary development with new words. And we're using kinesthetic, tactile, audio, and visual learning. Summarize lesson. What did you learn about butterflies? We'll have a worksheet. Kinesthetic tactile learning is used. Relate reading to students' experiences in a field trip and a video. And that'll also be using kinesthetic audio-visual learning. There's tactile concrete experiences in math and science. So they're going to identify the shapes, colors, sizes. And that'll be using kinesthetic tactile learning as well. So the learning styles here that we learned in chapter 2, there are kinesthetic tactile learning, which you have to do it. So it's physically doing something. Visual learning, which a student has to see something to learn it. They take in information. Auditory learners, which is hearing something. So they're going to hear what the teacher's talking about and bring it in. Take it into their thoughts and keep it there. There's also at least 3 types of factors that contribute to a student's individual learning style. There's physiology, which physically is something, is how they're affected. There's affective, or things that around them that are affecting them. There's cognitive, which is pretty much a brain issue, or their thinking or thoughts. However, there are students that intrinsically are motivated, meaning that they're motivated not anything by the teachers' reasoning or at school, anybody else's rules, but motivated by their own interests and not necessarily anyone else's. So they're going to just learn because, let's say, it's something that they had in their mind, or about past experiences with parents or things of that nature, that they have it in their mind. I have to learn because I have to graduate, I have to make more money, or things like that. So they're not necessarily motivated by what everybody else is motivated by in the classroom. So we have to keep that in mind as a teacher. So here we're going to teach the students in regards to the 4 stages of a butterfly. So in this, an adult butterfly lays eggs on the leaf of a plant, and it turns into a larvae once they hatch. And a larvae is a caterpillar, and the way they grow or survive is on the shell of the eggs after they hatch. It's pretty interesting. Then they turn into a chrysalis, which is pretty much like a hive, like a covering over them, where they're going to grow in there and stay in there. Then there's the pupa stage. Right here, right here in this picture, they're showing the stages where they go into the chrysalis, and within there they turn into the pupa, and then they turn into a butterfly once the wings dry and spread out. I'm also going to go into a little bit more detail with them, how some butterflies migrate, and explain to them that monarch butterflies specifically are one species that migrate. It's actually a phenomenon that they're migrating mainly across North America, and it says where the subspecies Danaus plexippus migrates each summer and autumn to and from overwintering sites on the west coast of California or mountainous sites in central Mexico. So in this, we can even stretch this lesson a little bit and ask them if they know where these places are. You can show them on a map and it goes into geography. So that's a little bit more that you can work with. I also forgot to say that these lessons are done over a period of maybe a week. They're not all done in one day because there's a lot of assessment after this. But there's several different activities just to give them more learning into what they're more in-depth information into what they're learning. After that, we can take a short break and do a quiz on the 4 stages of the butterfly. So we'll discuss with them in a fun way, what does the larvae eat? How does the eggs get on the leaf? How long does it take before the butterfly hatches? So just some introductory questions, not too many, just to see if they were paying attention, if they got the gist of what they heard. And then we're going to go into vocabulary. We're calling them new words. Vocabulary where they're learning a little bit longer words, more enunciation in their vocabulary words. And you'd be surprised how kids at this age pick up on what they just know. They may have heard these words already in watching shows like PBS that discusses metamorphosis. So metamorphosis, on this we're going to go over that and explain that it's a series of changes of the butterfly. So while the butterfly is changing, he's metamorphosizing. Okay, so then there's migration, which we discuss with the monarch, which is the movement of an animal from one place to another on a regular basis. So a lot of animals migrate, usually in the winter. Because it's colder months, they move up north every year. So that's a migration. They're proboscis. We can explain that it's a long tube that it's used by the butterfly to eat and drink, and we can show that. We can even go into more scientific depth for a little bit more advanced students in this area that like science and insects. I have a son that's like this, and he's been this way for a while. And so it's not foreign, or it's not wrong to think that these children can't retain this information, or they can't learn it or know it. They're pretty smart at this age, so I would not underestimate them to know words like this. So after learning some new vocabulary words, then we're going to go on to a butterfly worksheet. And this worksheet allows them to use their art skills. They're going to learn actually scientific, like a flow chart. It shows them the beginning, and the process. It's a process of the eggs being laid on the leaf, the caterpillar coming out of the eggs, going into the chrysalis, going into the butterfly, and how the whole process goes all over again because it takes another butterfly to lay more eggs, so then the process is going to continue. So they'll see that, and they'll see that whole process and summarize that. Then the next day we're going to go on to a book called Harry and the Monarch. With this, there's a little bit more critical thinking. So it gets them listening to the story. And the book talks about so many different things. It talks about different regions that the butterfly is traveling. It takes place in Texas. And it shows also friendship, how to make friends, or how you meet different people, different relationships, and different types of relationships in this short time in this story. It shows the natural life cycle of animals, or the butterfly specifically. So you can ask them, what does a butterfly eat in the story? Where did Hurry meet. Hurry is a tortoise in the book that the monarch butterfly meets. And there's a lot of dialogue back and forth. And so Hurry meets, so you're going to ask them, where did Hurry meet the monarch? Who did the monarch meet? How did they communicate? And the last question, you sometimes have little swift thinking kids too, and when they're listening. If they're good listeners, they'll realize that when I read this question, what did the first monarch do after leaving? So immediately some should click and say, well, there must be another one. You know, sometimes that happens and they can see that. Okay, so then in here, we're going to be using the materials and resources that are going to be used. I forgot to talk about the field trip. So what they're going to do is go on a walk, go for a walk, which is a nice way to get out and see nature, see the colors, see the shapes, see the sizes, see the butterflies in 3D and not just 2D on the paper and what I'm showing them on the video. They can actually touch them. They can see them. So the materials that we're using in the whole lesson and the resources and what the student will learn from, we have the book with Hurry and the Monarch, which is visual and audio because they're going to listen to the story. Then they'll be learning a reading skill, or the subject that they'll be doing is reading, or being read to. Then they'll go on a field trip where they go for a walk. That's a tactile, relate reading to students' experience in visual learning. And in this, there's a math subject. They'll identify patterns, colors, and shapes and sizes. There's on the worksheet or coloring sheet, this introduces them to the subject of art, reading, and language arts, and science. The video would be audio visual learning. It would also introduce them to science so they can see a lot of the things that I'm talking about while we're going through the lessons. And at the end, we're going to do assessments or comprehension to make sure that, or testing, which individually they're in reading groups, so we can ask them during the reading group time, which they're in small groups. So individually at the table, we can ask them a series of questions, and this would all be going on over the next week after the week of all these activities. So you can, then the next week they'll start a new lesson. So, but within the 2 weeks, they've learned so much about this subject that they should be able to retain this information and be able to explain it verbally as well as on paper. So they can do the questions. We're going to incorporate the same questions from the quiz as well as critical thinking questions. And we're going to ask them over a series of time in the reading group, what does the butterfly eat? Where did Hurry meet the monarch? Who did the monarch meet? We can combine these questions along with vocabulary words. And again, it'll be over in the space of another week. So we'll have time to test everyone individually. And so I just hope that you enjoyed this lesson and how to teach the life cycle of a butterfly. And thank you so much for listening. Okay, and have a good day.